Hello, this is Pat Lynch, and you are listening and watching the Career Pathways podcast, brought to you live from the KILT studio at the Lyon Library. Joining me, as always, is producer Cheyenne. Hello?
Hello, hello.
Hello. Yeah, I was going to say fully rested from a spring break. She was out in Branson. Did you go see any music acts, Cheyenne?
Nope. Unfortunately not.
Okay. All right, this conversation kind of hit a bit of a lull, but we're going to get this thing fired up and really going because I'm really, really glad to have in the studio Kenton Adler, the Director of Development for Scottish Heritage. Yes.
Longest title on the Lyon campus.
I love it. Yeah.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Pat. Thanks, Cheyenne.
Yeah, the Dos Equis guy has nothing on you. You are definitely one of the most interesting people I know.
Well, thanks. I don't know about that, and I don't know how much you know, but
well, that's what we're here for.
I've been around.
Well, we always start with just general questions. Just kind of tell us about yourself, your path from the beginning and so how you ended up here at Lyon College.
Okay, well, we only have an hour, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm from Arkansas originally. I was born in Camden, small town down in South Arkansas. Moved out to Colorado when I was about 10 years old. My dad took a job out there with a very large printing company, and so we moved there. And I grew up in the Denver area, mostly out in Aurora, and went to high school out there. Did a year at the University of Northern Colorado after I graduated, got kicked out. They asked me to leave at the end of the second quarter, and then about the end of the third quarter, they insisted. And so I left there, and I went to work for a couple of years for Sky Chefs, the people who do the meals on airlines.
Yeah.
And so I was working out there at Denver's old airport, Stapleton International, and loved it. And then my job classification got eliminated, so I left that. And I could have kept showing up, but I don't think they would have let me on the ramp.
George Costanza.
Yeah, and so I joined the Navy. I had always wanted to join the Air Force, and my mother wouldn't let me, but I joined the Navy. And I wanted to be what was called an anti-submarine warfare operator and be on a flight crew of an S-3A Viking. But they didn't have any openings in that school. And so my recruiter said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll guarantee that if we put you in the OB-OC spec, you will either be an AW, like what you want, or the other two options are you can be an air traffic controller, an AC, or you can become an aerographer's mate, an AG, which is a meteorologist. So I said, okay, AW, AC, AG. So, of course, they made me an AG because that's how they always work it.
Yeah.
But as it worked out, becoming a meteorologist was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. I was a surface observer at the Naval Air Station in Memphis for a year and a half, and then I got sent to a specialized school up in Illinois and became an upper air operator. And so I was out on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, which is very much in the news right now because the administration just sent a load of B-2 bombers out there and all their support group, and they're sitting on the tarmac waiting to see some action, but my old stomping ground. And after I got out of the Navy in 1980, I went back to Denver and went to work for my dad, who had started his own commercial printing company, and I spent 8 years working for him. And then when I stopped doing that, I did a lot of different things. I was a photographer for a while, and I worked as an art teacher for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Denver. And then did a few things like that. 1992, I moved back to Arkansas, to Fayetteville, and I opened a vintage guitar store.
Yes.
And
all right.
then I kind of did that just because I wanted to kill some time. Mostly we sat around playing guitar and drinking coffee all day with my friends. I didn't really sell very much. And then I bought a lot of things.
Of course.
But, I shut that down and then went to graduate school. I decided I want to get a master's in history, so I went to U of A. It was right up the street.
Yeah.
And right after I finished that, I was at a dinner party one night, and I had a red 1966 Corvette. Beautiful car. It was really a killer. And I'm at this party, and a guy comes up, and we're talking, and he's like, well, you're kind of an interesting guy. I said, thanks, you're kind of an interesting guy, too. He goes, what do you do? I said, nothing. I just got out of grad school, and I am not going to go into food service. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to sell my car. And he goes, well, no, you can't do that. That's a gorgeous car. And it was red, black interior, went about 300 miles an hour. And I said, well, I don't have much choice. And he goes, well, why don't you come to work for me? And I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm Bob Zimmerman, and I'm the director of computing services for the university. And I said, well, I don't really know all that much about computers. I said, I use my account, you know, while I've been a student, but I don't really know anything about it. He goes, I got 200 guys that know about computers. I need somebody that can write. Can you write? Oh, yeah.
Of course I can.
I'm a storyteller, obviously. I said, yeah, I can write. And he said, okay, I need somebody that can write grant proposals to the national, or to, at the time, it was, National Science Foundation, NSF. So I said, okay. So I went in, and they had a couple of these before, and I got a look at them, and they were big. I mean, it was like probably a $7 million proposal that he wanted me to write. And so I said, okay, it was to get about half a dozen to a dozen schools around Arkansas, smaller schools, onto the computer backbone, which at that time was called ArcNet and ran out of the University of Arkansas. We were trying to get all these other schools onto ArcNet. And so I wrote this proposal. And the way grants work, as you know, I got about half of it funded. It's probably about $4 million came through. And so I was very popular. And so they kept me on and said, okay, we got another one coming up. And that one, we got about halfway through it, and they decided to drop it. But I had done so much work, I decided I was going to go ahead and finish it anyway. So I did. And it pulled in another $2 million. So, yay, it wasn't as much as we'd hoped for, but we got a lot of schools on the back. In the meantime, in between grant proposals, they needed me to do something. Right. So I started learning how to use the computer resources that we had available at the university, and then I started teaching these, we called them short courses. I started teaching other people how to do that. Back at that time, you couldn't just click on a link and it would download a file. You had to use file transfer protocol, and it was all, we were on a Unix system, so it was all, typing out code and stuff like that. And there were some other things. Gopher, which was one of the early kind of searchable catalogs that you could get onto and visit university libraries. I mean, I thought it was crazy that I could sit there in my boxer shorts eating Oreos and get on the Oxford Library and see what I couldn't read the books, but I could see what they had in their catalog, which was cool on a Saturday morning. So great. So I learned to do that. I had an art degree already. Oh, yeah, I forgot. While I was working for my dad, I went to college, and I was also playing guitar in a couple of different rock bands that whole time. So stayed pretty busy. I used to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I wouldn't get home until 2, 3 in the morning the next day, depending on where I was playing that night or whatever. My bands were pretty popular. So anyway, I kept doing that all the time. I was in Fayetteville, and while I was in the Navy, used to play around northern Mississippi. So I've been a guitar player forever. But anyway, while I'm working for the university, I'm fiddling around on my computer one day, and I see this group that was called Rec Music Makers Bagpipe on the old Usenet system. And I thought, I'll check that out. So I went in there, and here's people talking about bagpipes. Right. I said, hey, I always wanted to learn how to do that, So I asked, where does a guy in Arkansas learn how to play? And a guy named Chris Knife wrote me back and said, well, stupid, you have a band right there in town. Just go ask them. They'll teach you. So I said, okay. I went to the Ozark Highlanders and said, I'd like to learn how to play. And they said, we'd love to learn how to teach you. And so they did. And I started playing with them and eventually met Chris because he worked here in the advancement office at that time and played with the Lyon pipe band. Right. Well, we started coming over here. Well, they were already doing it, but now I started coming with them to the Arkansas Scottish Festival, which used to be in April. And got over here, and I just really loved the town, and I liked the college. And I had been playing for about 3 years. 1998, I wrote Willie Muirhead, who was the director of the program, said, hey, I'd really like to come and play with your band. Any job openings over there? And he said, I don't know, let me see. And they wrote me back and said, well, we got an opening for an instructional technologist. So that's the person who worked with the faculty, demonstrating to them how to use the various computer resources that were available. So boom, I said, okay, great. I applied for the job, came over here for the Scottish Festival and interviewed for the job the same day, and then played that night down at Danny Dozier's old place, which was the Depot Diner at the time before he did the Lock House. And so it was like that, it was a busy weekend. But I got the job and came over here in July of 1998 and was, for the first 14 years I was here, instructional technologist. And I also manned the webmaster position, and for about 10 years I was the email administrator while we were on this system called First Class. I brought a learning management system with me that was it was like an open source free
Right.
thing. So I brought that, and we eventually bought into this thing called Educator, which Paul Buby and I came across while we were at a conference
Right.
up in Michigan or someplace, Ohio. I think that came from Otterbein College.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did that. So, I was running, basically wearing 4 hats and playing in the pipe band and working about 70 hours a week and doing the weekend stuff. So been doing that ever since, playing with Jimmy Bell since 2003 when he came here. And then met my wife in about 2004, and we got married eventually in 2008 after the band. She joined up with us and came with us to Scotland for the World Pipe Band Championships. So anyhow, been doing that ever since. And
so
I worked 10 years as a prospect researcher when they outsourced IT. Dr. Weatherman, who was the president at the time, moved me over to advancement, and I worked for Gina Garrett over there and a succession of vice presidents up until we came to our current, Dr. Hutchison. So
Okay, and then you
2 years ago they moved me over into Scottish Heritage.
that's what is at Scottish Heritage at Lyon College. I just know that I've been over there and met Jimmy and you and thank you. You gave me the full kilt. I'm too damn timid. I cannot put that kilt on.
Why? It's an awesome garment.
I
and
think I'd
chicks dig it. Let me tell you that.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I'd make babies cry. And
I've been wearing it for 30 years.
People
women like a man in a kilt, believe me.
Well,
at least women of distinction, the kind you want to be spending your time with.
You're giving me hope.
Yeah, no, you look great in a kilt. You met Patrick Regan. The two of you guys could run around together.
Yeah, hey, there you are.
There you go. No.
So, but what is our Scottish heritage?
Okay. The college was originally Arkansas College, as you know, founded in part by the Presbyterian Church back in 1872.
Right.
And the Church of Scotland is the Presbyterian Church. In fact, a lot of people aren't aware that during the Revolutionary War, we had a pretty hard time over here in America being loyal to the Church of England. So for that period during the Revolutionary War, we actually established a relationship as a nation with the Church of Scotland. Because it was very similar. The Episcopalians, the Church of England, are a little bit more high church than the Presbyterians, but it's very similar sort of theology, I guess, but different administration. But anyway, we were founded in part by the Presbyterian Church. And in the early 1980s, one of our advancement folks, Dr. Ralph Graham, said, it'd be a great idea if we acknowledged the Scottish heritage that the college has. So they started initially just doing some student Highland games during homecoming weekend. They'd go out there and throw a fake caber and maybe, try and do a sheaf toss and some of that stuff. And strangely, there have always been a couple of pipers around here. When I was working and doing prospect research and going through old annuals, I would find pipers back to the 1920s.
Whoa.
They weren't really officially tied to the college, but they were here and playing. And we had the Lassies, who was the singing group in the 70s that wore little tartan mini skirts and went around and sang in Greenland and did USO tours and stuff. Very, very popular, nationally prominent. So anyway, we always had that tie. But then the games started getting bigger, and they started having this Ozark Scottish Festival. And they moved it from the fall into the spring so that there would be, the homecoming event in the fall and then the big festival in the spring. And pipe bands started to come here to compete, and solos started to come to compete, and then we still had the Highland Games, and they bring in Highland dancers. And when Willie Muirhead came in, he really made it into a serious thing. I mean, the pipe band jumped a couple of notches in terms of their competitiveness and the quality of the sound and that kind of thing. And we had some really high-end solo players here. The first couple of years that I was here, like I said, we went all over the country, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, just Oklahoma, Kansas, wherever there was a games, we were there. And most of the time, the band brought home first place and in our grade, and the soloists all came home with all the hardware. And then Willie left here in 2002, I think, the end of 2002, and he went up and started a program at a college in Illinois. And that's when Jimmy Bell came on board in 2003. He'd been here several times as a judge, and so I knew him and really liked him.
Yeah.
He comes from one of the really great piping families in the United States. His dad, George Bell, was one of the top instructors in the Northeast. He was from Scotland, George was. Had played with the Hardy band, Bob Hardy's band back in Scotland. And Jimmy has won, just everything that you can win on this side of the pond. And, he's one of the top pipers you'd ever want to meet in your life. I mean, I say, he's one of the greatest in North America, and I don't just throw that around. I mean, there's probably like 3 or 4 guys that are even close to, the level that he plays at, and the amount of knowledge that he has with regard especially to Pibroch, the classical music of bagpiping, is astounding. I mean, the guy could rattle off 2 or 3 different styles on 300 tunes. He may not have them all ready at the fingers, but he knows the tunes and he knows, the structure, and could probably sit down and play 100 of them without looking at a piece of music and, play it in several different styles. So
now, is there sheet music for bagpipes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From the standpoint, you mentioned Bob Christian a while ago.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of like marching band, they'd be horrified because bagpipes, we say that they are in B flat, but they really are, or we say they're in A, but we're really closer to being in B flat. The pitch of the chanter has come up over the years, and you tune the drones to the chanter, and so, it's a lot sharper than it used to be. But all of our music, first off, we only have 9 notes. Right? There's no sharps, no flats written. There are a couple that are there actually in the Mixolydian scale, but they're not written down. So we just are looking at low G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and high G and high A. And that's all the notes we can play. You can kind of bend some now and again and get some fake fingerings and stuff like that and do different things. But we often will sit down around a round table with all the band. And I showed you a practice chanter earlier. It's here, I'll pull one out while we're talking. It's just
let's get the bagpipe out. I think less talk. Yeah, we got to stop talking. Yes.
This is a practice chanter, though, and it's got the 9 notes, and it's low G. That's all you can play, up and down, and so it's 9 notes and innumerable permutations thereof is basically what it boils down to. So anyway, you get started on this thing, but we sit around a table and learn new tunes looking at a piece of sheet music most of the time. And then figuring it out, hashing it out, and we may sometimes make some changes. Jimmy may have grown up playing that tune a little bit differently than the piece of music that we have written there. And so, we play it more how he wants to play it. The pipe major makes that determination just like a band director would.
Oh, okay.
So he is the authority when it comes to what we play and how we play it. So, and he makes all the band decisions, like what color socks we're going to wear with our tartan. And we used to wear white when Willie was here, and we've been in navy blue since Jimmy got here.
Yeah.
White was very popular back in the early 90s or the late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh. Well, can you break out the bagpipe? Let's
show you what's going on here. People, first off,
yes.
Here's the case, and people go, "You fit that thing into there?"
Yeah.
Actually, I could probably put, if I didn't have so much junk in here, I could probably put 2 full bagpipes inside this case because they break down, and I usually keep them mostly together. But you've got 3 drones, which are these long pipes that come off the top.
Right.
And then the chanter is this part where I was just doing the fingering.
Right.
And on that one that I just played on that practice chanter, they have a plastic reed in it, and it's pretty quiet. This has a double-bladed cane reed.
Right.
The other difference is that little practice chanter is what they call a straight bore. So it's just a single diameter hole that goes from here at the bulb down to the sole. This has a conical bore, so it's more like a megaphone, like a cheerleader would use. I'll pop this out of here for a second. I don't know that we're going to really want to play the bagpipe in here because it's a small room.
Oh, we got to get
blow this and let you hear what it's going on.
Oh, right, yeah, we got to get a taste.
I'm going to get this a little wet, but it's got this double-bladed reed.
Yeah,
and we all try to use the same chanter in the band. This is a Shepherd Mark III, and we've been playing these for years. They're great. They're very forgiving. And everybody's got a reed that Jimmy gives them. I'm playing a G1 Platinum Easy Plus because I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
I don't see the point in blowing something that's going to break my heart. But it's still pretty loud. So you heard how the volume was on that. This is much, 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 much louder, Cheyenne. So that's, there's the chanter. And that fits into the chanter stock. And I will stand up for a second and just give you a little taste of what this is.
Because then, that's kind of like the melody almost.
Yeah.
But then, there's all the drone. Then there's like
all of the melody comes off the chanter.
Got
and
it.
The drones, when you strike in, you have that low A that I played there at the bottom of the scale. All the drones are tuned to A. So these two are tuned 1 octave below this low A. And this one is 2 octaves below that low A. And once you fire up the drones, we call it striking in. I kind of whack the bag and the drones start. Once that starts, they just continue to go until I'm ready to stop. Stop playing. But then I go a little harder to get the chanter going. And I'll just give you a little taste. I'm not going to play too much. For one thing, if I were going to do any serious playing, I'd go off someplace and tune these things up for about 15 minutes. I'd blow that chanter in. It's not going to be like that right now, but I'm going to blow it up, tune it to where it is, and maybe just play a couple of measures of the tune so you can hear it, and then it's going to start to change, so I'm not going to keep going. Anyway, there's a leather bag up in here. It's got a cover that's got our lovely golden lion on the outside. So I make sure I got enough air in there. Dry, it's squeaky.
Yeah,
it all
beautiful
smooths
though.
out,
Yeah,
and it gets really pretty. That big squeak is just because the chanter reed's so dry. But if I played it for about 15, 20 minutes, get it going, it'll be rocking. So,
now why is it that it sounds kind of familiar, like an accordion in some ways?
Actually, the accordion and the harmonica and a couple other instruments are very closely related to the bagpipe. They all operate off reeds.
Reeds, right.
So it's a reed instrument. This is probably invented by, shepherds that didn't have anything better to do sitting out in the field, and they probably started blowing a blade of grass between their thumbs and getting that sound. I don't know. There is no definitive answer to where did they come from, but mostly somewhere around the Middle East, Greece, Egypt, had bagpipe of some sort early on. A lot of people don't realize that Nero wasn't really fiddling when Rome was burning. He was a piper. He was blowing some kind of a bagpipe.
Whoa.
Yeah, right? So at least that's the story. So anyway, they've evolved. The Irish play a version of this great Highland pipe that only has 2 drones instead of 3. Just has a tenor and a bass, and somebody said that they gave the 3 drones to the Scots as a joke, and the Scots didn't get it and just kept the 3rd drone and kept playing. But
where do you buy a bag, like a set of bag? Is it
some people
bagpipe
call
or
it a stand of bagpipes?
A stand
some
of bags.
People say a set of bagpipes or a bagpipe.
Yeah.
I just call them pipes most of the time. But anyway, if you buy them new, there are several companies: McCallum, Nail, Shepherd, Gibson. There's a guy named Roddy McClellan here in the United States that makes them and sells some really fine pipes. Average start, and I can't say a starter set, but a more simple set that doesn't have all the beating and combing and decorative stuff. You can probably get into it for about $1,200 to $1,400. For a brand new pipe. This particular pipe that I play in the band is an older, probably late 1950s, 1960s Hardy bagpipe made by Robert Hardy, and they're still in business. You can buy a new set of Hardys from Scotland, but and they make great stuff. That was a Hardy practice janner that I was
Right.
playing on a while ago. But this particular set I bought used off a guy in Japan for $500. I saw him advertise them. I said, "Hey, I want to make an Irish war pipe out of that."
Right.
And I got him and was going to take that middle drone out and just use 2 drones like the war pipe. And Jimmy's like, "No, you're playing those in the band.
Yeah.
That's the sound I want." I also have a set of 1917 Peter Hendersons, which is a very desirable bagpipe that's engraved silver and real elephant ivory fittings and stuff. Those are probably worth about $6,000 these days.
Wow.
And then I have another set that's my solo competition set that I used. And that was made for me by my friend Steve Anderson, who lives over in Tennessee. He came to our piping summer school one year. And in fact, Jimmy and I just had lunch with Elliot Smith about 2 weeks ago over in Fayetteville, who was a piper in the band at that time. And I came over to the summer school one morning, and Elliot's standing out there playing this set of pipes that looked like table legs. The drones looked like the legs of this coffee table. They were square and sticking up off his shoulder in these big chunks. I'm like, what is that? They sounded fantastic. He goes, Steve's making these. He hasn't turned the outside of them yet. He's just done the interior. I said, that's one of the greatest sounding bagpipes I have ever heard. Man, those are fabulous drones. So I went in and said, Steve, will you make me a stand of pipes? And he's like, sure. So, 6 months later, I had a set of his pipes, and I still play them. They're fantastic. So you get them different places, different prices, anywhere from, like I say, from about $500 for a used set up to $6,000 or $7,000 or more for a really desirable vintage set, and in between for other stuff. And there are pipe supply shops. We go to a guy named John Higgins up in Kansas City for uniforms and stuff. We buy a lot of our reeds and other piping supplies and stuff like that from Henderson Imports, which I think they're in Michigan.
Right.
And everything's over the computer now. It's easy to find stuff. When I first got playing, man, I mean, you couldn't find anything. I'd have to get on the phone and call Scotland and talk to some guy 6 hours ahead of me. Hey, can I get this? Oh, hey, we can go out for you. Exactly.
Now you're a podcaster.
Yeah.
The Celtic Crossroads. How many episodes altogether?
I just recorded number 66 yesterday.
Amazing, yeah.
And it'll run on Friday night at 6 o'clock.
An award-winning podcaster, no less.
Best male-hosted podcast, according to Arcast.
Yep, well-earned and well-deserved.
Thank you.
So what was your motivation? What was the interest and story behind starting the podcast?
There is a great story behind that. I'm glad you asked that, Pat.
You're welcome.
I had, for years, a friend by the name of Robert Campbell. Mm-hmm. I met Robert right about the time Jimmy got here back in 2003. Right. He was holding a birthday party for what would have been his late father's 100th birthday. Wow. And he did that at the train station, which has been converted into a museum in Earle, Arkansas, where he grew up and where he lived at that time. And so I became friends with Robert when we went down and played that party. He started having me come to his home in Earle every year, and he and his lovely wife Renata would put on this big party in October that was the celebration of the birthday of this massive oak tree that was in his backyard and is still there. And when I say massive, I mean it would take 6 guys my size at arm's length to go all the way around that trunk. Yeah. It's as big around, the trunk of that tree is as big around as this room we're in now. So we started going over there and playing at this party. And Nancy would come with me after she and I met and after we got married. And then he would say, well, can you bring a drummer? Maybe another piper? Have you got any dancers? And so, we'd go over there. And basically what we would do is play for about an hour before the real festivities started. And then Father Terry, most years, he's had a substitute a couple of times, but from the Episcopal Church in Memphis would come over, and he would get a pitcher of holy water and dip a branch from the great oak in that tree, and then we would play Scotland the Brave and march in and out of the party attendees out in the backyard, and he'd splash them with holy water, and we would lead them back over to the tree, and then he would give an invocation, a blessing of the tree, and then we would play Amazing Grace and then go party. And he always had a great, like a New Orleans-style jazz band or a bluegrass band or somebody on this porch out in the back of the house. And the party would go on for 4 or 5 hours. Renata makes this fantastic vegetable soup, and they would have a catered, like barbecue and fish fry, and people would bring desserts and salads. So great party. Well, that went on for quite a while. And then last year, unfortunately, Robert died. He'd had congestive heart failure, and I knew he'd been ill. But on the morning of his death, he called me at like 6:30 in the morning. Now, I don't get up until 7, so my phone was in the other room, and I didn't see it until I got to work at 8 o'clock. I pulled my phone out, and I was like, oh, there's a message from Robert. And I listened to it, and he's like, Kenton, he had this great, deep voice with a bit of a Southern accent. He's like, Kenton, I can't do the Great Oak this year. I'm really sorry. Hopefully we'll get together and do it again next year. I said, okay, I'll call him back here in a little bit. Check my email and get going. I'll call him back. And I hadn't been there about 15 minutes, and Cindy Barber, our alumni director, called me and said, hey, Hugh Campbell just called me, and he would like to talk to you. And I said, I'll bet it's about Robert. Yeah. And so Hugh is a Lyon alum. Right. Then Robert went to Rhodes, I think, but Hugh was a Lyon alum. So anyway, I've known Hugh all this time because he always came to the party. So I called him. I said, hey, how you doing? He said, well, I'm real sorry to tell you that Robert died this morning. I was like, what? Yeah. He just left a message on my machine. He said, yeah, I know. It was one of the last things he did. Wow. And he said Renata was with him when he passed away. He was quiet and, very, very dignified and just the way he would have liked it. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because what a great guy. Yeah. One of the most interesting people I ever met. And, I've met a lot of interesting people, so that's saying something. I really, really like the guy. He could recite the Charge of the Light Brigade from memory, for one thing, and that always appealed to me. So anyway, a couple of days later, Renata called me, and she said, I just wanted you to know that Robert, in his will, left to Lyon College his collection of CDs, Celtic music CDs. And I said, well, God, that's fantastic, because Robert, in addition to all the other cool things he did, was the presenter for a program called Strands of the Celtic Knot that ran on WEVL radio in Memphis. And they're public supported. They're not NPR, but they're a non-commercial radio station over there with really great, interesting programming. And he did a 3-hour Celtic music program over there for 30 years on Saturday morning. So this massive collection of CDs, there's like 4,000 of them. And I said, well, that's fantastic. We'd love to have that. So Nancy and I drove over there one Sunday afternoon, and Renata helped us, and we packed it all up, loaded up, and brought it back here. So now in the Mabee Simpson Library upstairs on the top floor, there is a Robert Louis Campbell collection room that houses those CDs, and some of which I still need to move over here from where I've got them stored at my house, because you can't really do that during the day when students are in there studying. So I got a few more to bring over, and I'm getting some furniture put in there and stuff. But the other thing was, within a matter of 2 or 3 months, I thought, well, I'm not just going to let those CDs sit up there. Yeah. Robert did this radio show for all these years, and I should keep his legacy alive by continuing to, produce some kind of a program. So I did, and I just started. It started when KILT was actually an internet radio station, right? And we started there on KILT, and then that was converted into the YouTube platform, and the radio station was done away with, but now it's on YouTube, and that's where the podcasts get hosted. So I just kept right on going. I never missed a beat. And Dr. Shulga uploads the thing for me every week. I make the program, and when it's done, I send it to him as an attachment, and it appears like magic on Friday. Yeah.
How do you go about creating shows? Are there themes, or
sometimes? Sometimes. Well, I have a fairly good knowledge of Celtic music anyway, from being a piper for so long and listening to that kind of stuff. I've gone to see the Tannehill Weavers and the Battlefield Band and a lot of the Chieftains several times. We played with the Chieftains in Fayetteville. The Lyon College Band did one year back around 2004, I think, or 2005. So I knew about these bands anyway. And so what I do is, like most of the time, I'll just go through and look for titles, or if I think of something during the week, I think, I might like to hear the Pentangle this weekend, Bert Jansch play, some guitar or something. And so I'll go and see what Pentangle CDs are there, and I go through and look and pick them out. And I had a little bit of background in radio already.
Right.
When I lived in the Indian Ocean, I volunteered for the Armed Forces radio station out there, and I used to do a jazz show every night for an hour. And then when I got to the point where I really couldn't keep up with that, I started doing a 2-hour program on Monday nights that was like classic rock.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a while out there. So, and then when I was going to graduate school in Fayetteville, I got a job working for a country radio station over there in Springdale. Yeah. Beaver 105, today's hot new country, you know, and we play Garth Brooks and Dwight Yoakam and Vince Gill and all these guys, Patty Loveless. So I knew a little bit about how radio worked to begin with. And then, so when I put a show together now, I'll go through and find stuff either that I'm interested in already, or I see something that has a cool name that I don't recognize, and I'm like, well, you know, I'll give that a listen. So I pull enough discs to build a show. It usually takes me anywhere from 13 to 15, 16 tracks on a show for 1 hour.
Right.
Because I get on and, you know, I tell people what I'm playing and what album it came off of and stuff. And so I do like that. And then sometimes I will do a theme show like St. Patrick's Day. Last year, I have a friend, a guy named Danny Tate, who is a very, very talented songwriter. He had songs out in the 1980s that you have listened to and may have on albums.
Okay.
You ever hear Affair of the Heart by Rick Springfield? Danny was one of the writers of that tune.
Oh, right.
He used to write for Kenny Wayne Shepherd and the Smithereens, and he's written for, the Bodines and all these.
Hopefully he's making some money on royalties.
$1 or $2 here and there. Yeah, he's a whole nother story. Listen, we could sit and talk about Danny for an hour. Great guy. Friends from when I was a little kid in Camden. We've known each other since we were 6 years old. And strangely, he dated a girl in college that I did not know, that my sister met at a party in Denver one night, and she called me and said, "Hey, you know Danny Tate, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I'm here with his old girlfriend from college." I was like, "What?" So she gets on. Sure enough, it's the same Danny Tate. We're talking, and I said, "Well, what was a girl from Ohio doing at Ouachita Baptist College?" She goes, "Oh, my family lives in Arkadelphia." I said, "Well, who's your family?" She said, "The Deatons." I said, "Get out of here, because that's my family from Arkadelphia." And it turned out we're like third cousins. We both have the same great-great-great-grandfather, but we came down different lines from Gooden Deaton down there in Clark County. So, you know, like that. But anyway, Danny, for St. Patrick's Day last year, I said, "Hey, man, write me a song for St. Patrick's Day." And he was in Mexico at the time, and he found these Irish musicians in Guadalajara that were called Mexica Irish, and he got with them, and he wrote this song and got him to record it, and it was about the Irish battalion that was down there during the Mexican-American War, who had deserted from the American Army and went to work for the Mexicans down there fighting against the Americans. And there's a great movie out about it, but he wrote this song called Saints and Sinners, and I opened the St. Patrick's Day show with that. But, you know, I did mostly Irish tunes that day. We played Ullin Pipe, which is the bellows-blown Irish pipe that you hear more than the Great Highland Pipe, although there are some really great Irish Great Highland Pipe bands. My favorite band is the Field Marshal Montgomery Pipe Band, and they play traditional Scottish style, but are an Irish band from Belfast. And St. Lawrence O'Toole's another great Irish band from Dublin, you know, so they're out there. But anyway, I play theme shows now and again. I did kind of an Irish, you know, St. Patrick's Day again this year, and then I don't know. I can't tell you what's coming up here in the next month. I've got a special surprise on tap for the end of April. All right. That'll be not so much a theme, but have a couple of special touches. So I do like that, you know.
And does Jimmy help you as far as picking the music?
In terms of, like, no, he doesn't really help me pick the music. He, like, gives me some advice on stuff that he likes. Yeah. You know, I particularly like that show. I played something for him this morning that was some Northumbrian piping, and he was not real crazy about that. And I understand. It was first off, it was an old recording from the 1950s. Right. And the Northumbrian pipes, they have a wider range than what we play, and also bellows blown, this particular pipe. And they have a wider range of notes and sharps and flats, and they have these stops so they can do these little blip, blip, blip things that we don't do. And he's listening to that tune that I opened the show with, and he's starting to laugh. And I said, what's up? And he goes, "Oh, just that blip, blop, blip, blop." Right. And I'm like, okay. So some stuff he doesn't care for.
With 4,000 CDs, how do you catalog all that information?
That is an excellent question.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is I have not yet. But
So it's a treasure hunt?
right
but
now
yeah.
it is a treasure hunt
Yeah.
every time. Every time,
Yeah.
even if I go through my own stuff, it's a treasure hunt. I don't know what I have at home. I've got a couple of hundred things. But my lovely wife, Nancy, has a lovely sister whose name is Deborah Hadeen. And Deborah is trained as a medical librarian. That was what she got her degree in.
There you go.
So, and she loves all things Scottish. She's a big Outlander fan, and she goes to all the Scottish festivals and stuff out around Monterey. And she's from New Orleans. She lives there part of the time, so she goes to stuff down there. She's come up here for our festival and Burns Night a number of times. You may have seen her or met her at some point. She was here back in October for the festival.
Okay.
And so anyway, lovely woman and just an awesome person. But when she was here last time, she said, hey, listen, I want to create a searchable database for you of those CDs. And I was like, really?
Tell me more.
Okay. Now we got some interesting stuff going on here. Because,
yeah.
it's going to be a massive job.
Yeah.
She has the computer skills, though, to create the database or to tweak, an existing database. And then we're going to literally have to go through there and catalog those things one by one, by artist, by album title, maybe by record company, and then all the tracks on every album. And that's going to be a lot of work. But she's hoping, and I hope, that we can get with somebody like at South Arkansas University, or maybe, I don't know if UCA has a library science major, but I would think that if anybody does, that they would. So we'll get maybe some volunteers from their library science programs to get with us and help us do this and create a searchable database for the thing.
Yeah.
It's already, just as it is right now, one of the greatest resources for Celtic music in the country.
Yeah.
Sitting right here in the Maybe Simpson Library. And now if we could make it searchable so that you could be at your office in, Indiana or somewhere and go, hey, I wonder if they have something by so-and-so there, and they can type in, da-da-da-da-da. There it is. Okay.
Kind of last question, Ken.
Okay.
Forever
or just for this session?
We'll leave that open-ended
Okay,
right now.
because I like to kind of plan ahead.
But, you fascinating life story. You've done
thanks.
so much. Kind of what advice would you give to kind of young people? Because because the beauty of your journey isn't like you had this plan. It's not.
No.
It was like 17-year-old Kenton I wrote down this plan and I followed it. It was kind of all this
All over the road.
but it all now just fits together and just is such a kind of a perfect tapestry of experiences.
That
so
is true. 17-year-old
Yeah.
Kenton in the Olympiad yearbook
yeah,
said, I want to go to Colorado University and study business law. And I didn't do either one of those
that'd have been
things.
soul crushing.
I did get accepted into Colorado University, but went to UNC instead because
Right.
my girlfriend I thought was going to go there. She wound up going to CSU, which is part of why I flunked out of UNC. I didn't really want to go
Right,
anywhere.
right,
I wanted
right.
to join the Air Force.
Yeah.
The succinct answer, and that people think I'm kidding, follow your bliss. You know Joseph Campbell? Mm-hmm. Okay, he was my boy. I did not know who he was until after I graduated from college. I wound up going to Metropolitan State University, and I double majored in art and psychology. I went in there to do graphic arts, but took a psych class and went, oh, this is awesome. So I double majored.
Right.
And then also took enough hours. If I'd taken 3 more hours of history, I would have been a triple major. But anyway, I love history too. So anyway, after I graduated, I stopped working for my dad after I'd been there for 8 years, and I decided I was going to just go back and take some more college classes because I thought I'd go teach history and psychology in high school in Colorado. Yeah. Usually, if you taught history, you also taught psych. So I thought I better go back and get some of these classes that I didn't pick up before. So I went back and took some more history, and I took economics and sociology and some geography and some stuff like that. I went for another year full-time toward nothing except to go and do it. But I'm sitting at home at the end of that year, that second semester, and was doing some homework. And I'm ADHD. I need constant input, strangely enough. I'm also an incredible introvert, a horrible introvert, And probably after we have this talk, I'm going to go home
Take
and
a
sit
nap.
in the dark and look at something blank for an hour. But I had the TV going in the background. I wasn't really paying any attention to it. But I'm sitting here and I'm writing and, working on this paper, and I start to hear this guy talking on the public broadcasting channel. And he sounded like my mother's husband. She was married 3 times. Her third husband was this cool guy named Buck Mary, who is an executive vice president for the Zale Corporation from New Orleans. So he also 6'5", 6'6", very deep voice and this great Southern accent. That seems to be kind of a theme through my life.
Yeah.
But this guy on TV sounded kind of like Buck. And so I looked up and I thought, well, God, he kind of looks like Buck a little bit too. And it was Joseph Campbell talking with Bill Moyers. And it was the Power of Myth series. And I love mythology.
Right.
I probably studied enough mythology that I could teach a course on it, no problem, if I wanted to or needed to. And so I'm watching this and listening to him talk. And he's talking about Native American mythology and European mythology and Asian mythology and all this stuff, and they're talking about these various themes that run through it. And so I got hooked on that series, and I watched all of it, the whole rest of it after that night. I went back and saw the whole rest of it. But the thing that he put forth all through that, and that was really his mantra for life, was follow your bliss. Do the thing that you love the most, and the universe will line itself up for you and wait for you to knock it down. And that's what I live by. Now, your bliss may change. I was a guitar player, and I still am. I talk like it's something in the past.
Yeah.
I just pulled out my Gretsch the other afternoon and played for about an hour down in the basement and, screamed my head off while Nancy was out taking care of the horses. And so I still do that. But the bagpipe is really what got me back in 1995. That completely changed the course of my life because I loved it. And everything that I've done since then, I can say, well, it started right there with the Ozark Highlanders in Fayetteville and went this way because I did what I love. I met Nancy. I came to work here. I met my best friend, Jimmy Bell. I met Robert. I met all these people that have had this profound effect on my life that I've been able to then transfer over, to people like Cheyenne. I try to show them that it's exciting to be a person and to do the things that you love to do. This experience that she's having right now as a producer is probably going to stick with her for, at least some time. I'm sure she'll find ways to incorporate
Well, I'm not
that
going to let her graduate.
There
She's
you go.
just going to stay the producer forever.
Yeah. And I mean,
Sorry.
you give career advice to kids, and that would be the first thing I would tell them is do what you love. Yeah. Don't go into a profession because your parents think it's a good idea, because if that was the case, I'd be selling jewelry in some mall chain store, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it wouldn't be right for me. And I wouldn't be having any effect on other people. I wouldn't be showing other people how to sell jewelry in a mall chain store. Yeah. But that was my mother. She loved that kind of stuff. She was a vice president with Zales, and the doors to Lalique and Bame and all these Waterford Crystal and all these places in Europe were open door for her. She'd walk up and they'd be like, "Oh, Gene, it's so great to see you. Come on in." She was a kind of a big wheel in that. So she was doing what she loved, and she thought she'd make me do that, and it wouldn't have worked. But doing what I love. And my dad, he retired, and he was always trying to get me to go into the printing business. He wanted me to take over his company with my sister and my brother. And I was like, nah, that's really not my thing. It was a good job, and I was good at it, but I wanted to do something else. And he would always say things to me like, well, psychology's not a real job, and you're never going to make it as a guitar player, whatever, because it wasn't what he knew. Sure. He wanted me to be successful, but doing what he knew success would come from. He used to say, you can be a paper cutter anywhere in America, but I didn't want to be a paper cutter. I wanted to play the dang bagpipe.
Success comes in many ways.
Yeah. And I think I'm a success here. I've been doing it for a while. Nobody's driven me off yet.
So. No, not yet. But thank you, Kenton.
Thank you for having me, Pat. Thank you, Cheyenne.
Yes. And thank you to the audience. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I mean, Kenton, you truly, it's what it's just fascinating story, and it's and just and also it's that whole thing around being a lifelong learner, because you are
never stop.
Even to this very day. There's new things that you're learning and are amazed by, and it's inspiring. So,
well, thanks.
Thank you.
Can we come back sometime and talk about King Arthur?
You bet. I'd love it. Yeah. Okay. Now we got to get Jason back from France. I think he'd be all in on that. What do you think, Cheyenne? Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That would. But again, thank you for listening and watching the Career Pathways podcast. We come to you every week, and just hope that you subscribe and like the podcast. If you do like the podcast and you give us a review, and Cheyenne's pulling the mic down because she knows where this is going, how many stars would we ask one of our subscribers to give us?
5 out of 5.
You bet. Okay.
And don't make us come over there.
We'll
Just
send
do
this
it
guy.
voluntarily.
This guy's much bigger than me, and he'll
and I'm
he'll
not
find
afraid
you.
to touch you up.
He'll find you. But again, thank you so much for everybody that had the chance to listen to this podcast. I hope you again enjoyed it as much as Cheyenne and I did. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
All right, and we'll catch you next week on the Career Pathways podcast. Thank you.
This broadcast is sponsored in part by Lyon College and by KILT Studios.